It's MazzaOnMets. I'm your host, Evan Mazza, here, back for another episode as we talk all things New York Mets baseball in the 2025 season. As we're about to hit the last month of the season, it's coming up, and the Mets continue their season, as this weekend they face the Miami Marlins. But the Mets coming off doing exactly what they had to do to get back into this National League Eastern Division race. So obviously, this is all we're going to talk about today on this show, along with previewing the Miami Marlins series. Talk about Nolan McLean, of course, who seems to be the star now of the Mets, and talk about some injuries here and there. Obviously, there was a big injury, some injury rehabs going on with some players, and of course another injury that happened in the minor leagues last night. Um, but we begin with the Philadelphia Phillies series. The Mets faced the Phillies and swept them at home at Citi Field and did what they had to do to get back into this division race. They swept the Philadelphia Phillies and they did it with good pitching, good bullpen mostly, and good timely two-out hitting. What a concept. That's how you win. That's how you beat the good teams. That's how you win championships. You do with good pitching and good timely hitting and good bullpen, again, for the most part. But still, the only downside of the bullpen was, of course, Ryan Helsley continued to struggling. But aside from that, the bullpen was pretty good over the week. Starting pitching wise, again, they got a couple of good outings from the starting pitchers over the week against the Phillies. But the Mets now have got themselves back in to the National League East Division race. They also increased their lead in the National League wild card over the Cincinnati Reds by 4.5 games, as the Cincinnati Reds over the last few days got swept by the Los Angeles Dodgers. But this series for the Mets, again, I don't want to jump to and say, well, the season's turned out. A lot of people kind of saying that the season's turned around, everything like that. I'm not going to say that because this weekend, I think, will show me if the Mets are ready to make a run. Believe it or not, for me, it's this weekend series against the Miami Marlins that will show me if they're ready to make a run at the playoffs or the division title. And I'll explain that at the later on. But we begin today with the series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Last night, we'll start with last night because I think that's what everyone's talking about. I start with the first game, second game, third game. Let's start with last night. Nolan McLean was phenomenal. He was phenomenal. The Mets have not had a minor league pitcher, guy come up from the minor leagues, pitch like this since Matt Harvey, since Noah Syndergaard, since Jacob DeGrom, etc. Even look, I know some might say Zach Wheeler, but not even Zach Wheeler is this good. Actually, they're showing it now on Baseball Night in New York. His curveball average spin rate is among the tops in the starting pitchers. And his curveball is fantastic. His location is fantastic. And what I love the most about him, he throws strikes. This dude throws strikes. And the Mets have needed a guy like him to just come up and throw strikes because they lead the league in walks again. They need someone to come up and throw strikes. His curveball average spin rate is the highest in Major League Baseball. They're just talking about it now, actually. But his sweeper is great, curveball great, fastball great. His location is really good. He went last night against the. I thought last night was his toughest task. Was his toughest task. Now we'll probably have another incredibly tough task coming up soon. As a matter of fact, the Mets go on the road to face the Phillies in a 4-game series. I bet you he's starting one of those games. So that'll be his toughest test. But his toughest test so far to this point was last night in Philadelphia. Last night against the Phillies, and he was fantastic. If you would, Nolan McLean in his third start in the big leagues pitched 8 shutout innings against the Phillies offense. And there wasn't anybody missing or anything. He faced Kyle Schwarber. He faced Bryce Harper. He faced Alec Bohm. He faced Trey Turner. He faced JT Realmuto. He faced Nick Castellanos. He faced all those guys, and he threw 8 shutout innings. Brandon Marshall, all those guys, and he faced 8, and he threw 8. Harrison Bader, and he threw 8 shutout innings. He was as impressive. That was as impressive of a start from a Mets young pitcher that I'd seen in quite some time. Even Matt Harvey didn't have that impressive of a start against an opponent like that in his first couple of outings. Jacob DeGrom didn't. Jacob DeGrom's debut was against the Yankees in 2014, but the Yankees weren't really that great in 2014. The Yankees were not a World Series contender in 2014. And he had a great debut too that year as well. So not even those guys in their first couple of starts, just their first couple, with a tough task like this against a great offense and a great team, was as impressive as Nolan McLean was. And you look at the opponents Nolan McLean has had to face in his first three starts. A really good playoff team in the Mariners. Braves are still the Braves who still have talent despite their down year and despite their struggles. And of course, the Phillies. And he has passed all three of it with flying colors so far. Again, it's only three starts, but he's been fantastic. And he has given the Mets exactly what they needed, at least in his spot of the rotation, a chance to win a ball game. Just a chance to win a ball game because the Mets have struggled, and length, because the Mets have struggled to get length out of their starting pitchers. They've struggled, or at least over the last 2 months. They've struggled to get the length out of the starting pitchers, and he has been able to give them length. He's been able to give them length to go 7, to go 8. It's a lot. Again, it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask for Nolan McLean. It's a lot to ask because it's a playoff push. He's just coming up in the minor leagues from the minor leagues. It's a tall, tall task. It's not easy, but he has given them exactly what they've needed. And he was fantastic again last night, going 8 shutout innings and helping the Mets defeat the Philadelphia Phillies to complete the sweep. On that day, to talk about that game just a little bit more. Again, the Mets were very good in terms of clutch hitting, very good in terms of timely hitting. Mark Vientos hit a key home run again to put them up 6-0. Juan Soto had a big RBI to put them up front. Lindor got an RBI. Yeah, Lindor RBI single in the bottom of the third. That made it 1-0 Mets. Juan Soto, who has been much better runs scoring position as of late, which is very good, very key. We're waiting for that. But Juan Soto over the last few weeks has been very good runs scoring position. He hit Alonso RBI single to make it 3-0. And then Mark Vientos hit a 2-run homer. That made it 6-0 Mets. There was also a sacrifice fly, I believe, by Brett Beatty that made it 4-0. That made it 4-0. But the Mets went on a roll from there. They scored runs. Then Nolan McLean took over and they won the game. That's how you win baseball games. That's how you're supposed to, that's how it's been. That's how it was supposed to be for this team. But of course, that was only yesterday's game. The Mets played 2 more games prior to that against the Phillies, and game 1, kind of similar to how they've been able to win some opener games. I mentioned this on the last show that the Mets in opener series games, there's been a couple or some where they've blown out the opponent in the first game and then lose the next 2. Well, the Mets did that in game 1 of this series, in terms of blowing the team out. Again, the first game of this series, 13-3, 13 runs, 14 hits. And the Mets won this game, and they won the second game again, there's no Zach Wheeler. Wheeler's obviously out for the season with the unfortunate blood clot injury. Actually, he now has to get the TOP surgery that Matt Harvey had years ago. As soon as I heard the type of injury that Zach Wheeler has, all I thought about was Matt Harvey, and Matt Harvey was never the same after that. It wasn't the Tommy John for Matt Harvey. It was that TOP surgery, and that's the one so now Wheeler might be getting it, or I think he is going to get that surgery. So it sucks for him. It does. And I feel for him because that's what happened to Harvey, and Harvey was never the same after that. But so Wheeler obviously no longer is out for the. So obviously Wheeler is out for the season for the Phillies. So Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo have taken over now as the 2 top pitchers on the Phillies rotation. Both very good pitchers, especially Christopher Sanchez. And the Mets did a very good job on both of them. Against Christopher Sanchez in game 1 of this series, the Mets hit 13 runs, 14 hits in this game against Sanchez. He went 5 1/3, 8 hits, 6 earned runs, 5 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. And it was the Mets offense again, kind of helping out Kodai Senga. Again, not the strongest of outing for Kodai Senga. 3 walks, 4 strikeouts, 6 hits, 3 earned runs, and just 4 innings pitched. So again, not the strongest outing for Kodai Senga. The Mets offense picked them up, but the Mets offense picked them up down 3-0 in this game early after Trey Turner tripled to lead off the game in the top of the first, and then he was driven in on a Kyle Schwarber RBI groundout. And then the top of the third, Harrison Bader, in the top of the third, Alec Bohm got an RBI single to make it 3-0. So the Mets are down 3-0 early in this ball game, but then the bottom of the third and the bottom of then the bottom of the fourth and the bottom of the fifth, they came roaring back against Christopher Sanchez. Mark Vientos RBI double after a Pete Alonso single and Juan Soto single. Brandon Nimmo with an RBI single. Tyrone Taylor, who's played pretty well as of recently, ever since he had spent those first 2 weeks on the bench. But he walked and he's played. He's probably earned himself more playing time. I think he's in the starting lineup tonight against the Miami Marlins. Jeff McNeil got an RBI single to tie the game at 3. And then the Mets just went off from there to pull this to just take over this game. Mark Vientos RBI double. He's continued his hot streak to make it 4-3. Tyrone Taylor then led up the bottom of the sixth with a double. Luis Torrens had a big night this day on this game. He drove him in with a double to make it 5-3. Starling Marte an RBI single, 6-3. And then the bottom of the seventh, Jeff McNeil with a sacrifice fly. Luis Torrens comes up, hits a 3-run home run to right center field. That's 5 RBI night for Luis Torrens. And Tyrone Taylor with an RBI single at the bottom of the eighth. Jeff McNeil an RBI single. Torrens with another RBI single as part of his 5 RBI night. So again, the Mets offense really, really playing great. Again, they've continued to play very well, and finally starting to kind of show the kind of offense that they're capable of. The Mets offense, look, I've said it all season long, and everyone has said it all season long. Everyone has. The Mets offense is better than what they've shown. They are too talented of an offense to continue, or at least on paper, to continue to struggle running scoring position the way they've struggled all season long. Now, I don't know if this will continue into September, but what they've shown over the last couple of games or a couple of weeks or so, I think since August 13th, 14th, 15th, whatever it is, they've shown you exactly the kind of offense they can be. And when you have Lindor, Alonso, Soto, Vientos, etc., Nimmo, McNeil, Alvarez, even when he's there, you should be, or Beatty, or who's a former first round pick, you should be able to do well offensively. Jeff McNeil, you should be able to do well offensively. But the Mets have not done well running scoring position. You just wonder if they played this well with runners in scoring position early in the season, they probably would be well above 500 and well in first place in the division, and not be worried about the wild card and chasing after the Phillies. And not be trying to hold on to the wild card spot and still trying to chase after the Phillies. But because of that, they are still 4 games back, and they are only 4.5 up on the Reds. So, but their offense has finally played better. They've actually made some adjustments. They've apparently gotten better at hitting the fastball down the middle. Wow. But they've apparently made some adjustments, which is great, finally. And they're starting to hit the way they're capable of hitting the baseball and the way they're capable of scoring runs. But they scored 13 runs on this day. And then on Monday, and then on Tuesday they faced off against Jose Luzardo, who historically has been both him and Christopher Sanchez historically have been very good against the Mets, and the Mets did a pretty solid job on Luzardo. They did a pretty solid job against Luzardo to do a good job on him and get him out of this game. He only goes 4 innings. I think, 4 innings, only 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks. So they were patient at the plate with him. They were consistent at the plate with him. They had a good approach against him. So, and Luzardo, you kind of got to give a little credit to Juan Soto here, because in Juan Soto's first at bat, he kind of got into Luzardo's head, because in his first at bat, there was a pitch that was a ball. It went to the ground, and Soto, I'll say playfully, kind of took the ball and snapped it almost like he was a center. Well, Jesus Luzardo didn't like that very much. And he actually, in the next pitch, threw inside on Soto. It looked like that was a message to him. This is early in the game in the first inning. He ends up, and you could tell and I think he shook his head and wasn't happy with the way Soto snapped that ball, snapped that baseball. Like I said, like he was a center playing football. If you watch it, that's what he did. He took the ball and he snapped it like a center. He was Kevin Mawae for a second, or whatever. But Luzardo didn't like it. He threw inside on Soto, and he ended up walking Soto in that at bat. He was a little frustrated there. And then the next at bat Soto had, he got him to ground out, and it was a great play by the second baseman. And Luzardo like kind of clapped with his glove and everything. So it kind of started with the Soto at bat where Luzardo got frustrated, and it carried over into the game of how frustrated he got. So Juan Soto, maybe not what he was trying to do, but Soto got into Luzardo's, head here, and Luzardo was not really the same pitcher after that first Soto at bat when he got upset with Soto. But after that, the Phillies did take a 2-0 lead in this game in the top of the fifth. But then the bottom of the fifth, just like the day before, the Mets responded back. Lindor base hit. Lindor got a base hit. Juan Soto got an RBI single to make it 2-1. Pete Alonso doubled to give the Mets the lead 3-2. Mark Vientos with a single to make it 4-2 Mets. So the Mets were able to respond back and take the lead here in this game, take a 5-2 lead in this game. But the Phillies crawled back. They scored around the top of the sixth, and then the top of the eighth. This is where I'm going to get on Carlos Mendoza here. And this is where Carlos Mendoza got a bit bailed out. So Tyler Rogers came into the game in the top of the seventh inning. This was for Sean Manaea. Manaea was, again, more of the same. 4 2/3, 6 hits, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. Again, strikeout numbers are up, but the length isn't there. It kind of loses it into the fourth or fifth innings. It's, again, more of the same outings from Senga and Manaea here in this one, in this series. But the bullpen picked them up, except for one guy. So in the top of the seventh inning, Tyler Rogers threw a 7-pitch inning. Now, you want to try to get to Edwin Diaz here. And you have the lead. Rogers has thrown 7 pitches, and you know how much Ryan Helsley has struggled. So who does Carlos Mendoza call in the 8th inning in a 5-3 game? In a big game, in a big series that you got to win. Well, he goes to Ryan Helsley. And I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. And it didn't make any sense, especially with how poorly Ryan Helsley has struggled since he came to the Mets. I mean, heck, even against the Braves when he was up 12-4 in that game, that first game, he gave up like 4 runs in the ninth. Or he allowed 4 runs in the ninth inning or so. And it was all of a sudden 12-4 became 12-7. So even in a game that the Mets were winning, well, Helsley was still struggling. So here he comes in a 5-3 game in the 8th inning in a key game, key series, division title, right? Division lead and everything, division game. I didn't understand why Carlos Mendoza put him in. It didn't make any sense. And especially didn't make any sense when Tyler Rogers only threw 7 pitches in the 7th inning. And then Helsley proceeds to give up a game-tying home run to Harrison Bader. Further again, I gotta criticize again. We can criticize Helsley. He didn't pitch well, he didn't perform well, but I also gotta think Carlos Mendoza. I think he figured, okay, I'll get Helsley in. If he gets 3 outs, that should get his confidence up. And look, the Mets need Helsley to pitch well, but I just think that wasn't a good spot for him, especially with the way Helsley has pitched. 5-3 game in the 8th inning in a big series, in a big game. But he put him in, and he gives up a 2-run homer to Harrison Bader. And then he has to call on Edwin Diaz. Carlos Mendoza has to go to Edwin Diaz in the 8th inning, and Edwin Diaz was phenomenal. He gets 5 outs. He bails out Mendoza. 5 outs, 4 strikeouts, and he gets the next 2 outs in the 8th and the 3 outs in the ninth, and he bails out Carlos Mendoza. And you know who also bails out Carlos Mendoza? All 4 hitters who stepped to the plate in the bottom of the 9th inning against Duran, one of the best, if not the best closer in all of baseball, at least up there with Edwin Diaz. They step up in the bottom. The Mets step up in the bottom of the 9th inning in a tie game. in the time against Jaron Duran, who the Phillies acquired for moments like this, of course. So Jahan Duran comes in this game. They acquired the trade deadline. They acquired him to get big outs like this in a tight game against your division rival. Hard hit base hit by Sterling Marte. Hard hit base hit by Pete Alonso. A bloop single by Brett Beatty that just fell in. And then Brandon Nimmo hits a hard hit RBI single to win the game. That was as key. I think that was the game right there. When the Mets won that game, I think that's when you knew they were winning the next day to complete the sweep because they came back again. Phillies came back and tied it. It was in the eighth inning. So you've seen it this season already where the Mets kind of, allowed the game to get away from them, right? In the seventh or eighth innings, and they're not able to come back from that. Well, in this game, they did. They came back from it. And against one of the best closers of baseball, they got four straight hits to win the game and a tie ball game. So that was as big of a win as you could have had in this series. Because then you set it up for the next day for how good Nolan McLean was. And he's able to go out there and give you 8 innings, and the offense gives you enough runs, and you win that game and you complete the sweep. So again, you got good starting pitching, especially from Nolan McLean. You got, aside from Ryan Helsley, very good bullpen contributions in this game and in this series, and very good timely offense. Very good timely offense in this game. They've been much better run scoring position, much better with 2 outs. So all in all, a very, very good week for the New York Mets as they sweep the Philadelphia Phillies. And now they're 4 games. And now, hey, again, I don't know if the Mets are going to win this division because you still got a tough series in Miami coming up. You got to go to Detroit, go to Cincinnati. You got to go to Philadelphia. They got to go to Chicago. It's going to be a tough ride for the Mets if they're going to win this division. Heck, it's still going to be a tough ride for them to win a wild card spot. But if the Mets can again, we've been. This is where I'm a little still not buying into the Mets right now and being still a little cautious because the Mets have done this over the last 2 or so months where they win a series or two and you go, okay, they've turned it around, and then they go back to lose, right? Remember, they beat the Brewers and Yankees 2 out of 3 when the Brewers especially were at one of their hottest, right? Or the Brewers were playing great. They still play great. Mets beat them 2 out of 3 at home. Then they beat the Yankees 2 out of 3. But then after that, they struggled again. Then the Mets won 7 in a row. Actually, no, before that, they lost after beating the Yankees. They lost 2 out of 3 to Baltimore. And those 2 games were at a doubleheader, and game one was a game they should have won. They then won 2 out of 3 against Kansas City for the first half to close out the first half. But so then they won 2 out of 3 against Kansas City to close out the first half. But then they lost 2 out of 3 to Cincinnati at home at Citi Field. They won. They lost 7. They won. Then they won 7 in a row. They won 7 in a row, and then they lost 7 in a row. Then they beat the Mariners 2 out of 3, but then they lost to Washington 2 out of 3. So this is why I say this weekend to me is a lot bigger for me to think this team has turned it around. Well, obviously, we've seen it so far with a lot of people. The Mets have turned it around. The Mets have turned it around. The Mets have turned it around. But I gotta see it folding. Because they've had these spurts over the last 2.5 months where you think, oh, they turned it around, but turns out they didn't, and they lost to the Orioles, and they lost to the Nationals, etc. They lost 7 in a row, etc. So this is the time for the Mets to take advantage of beating Atlanta, beating the Phillies, and taking off from there. Beating Seattle even and taking off from there. So this weekend is huge. This is a 4-game series against a Marlins team that has played very well in the second half of the season. There will be no pushovers. The Marlins are never pushover when it comes to the Mets. They've always played the Mets tough, especially in August, September. But they played very well. They've had a very good second half. They didn't trade at the trade deadline because they look at their roster and go, "Hey, we can compete pretty soon, next year or so." This is a Marlins team that's going to come in here motivated and ready to play. So just like when the Mets beat the Mariners and then went to Washington, the Mets could not lose that series. They couldn't. And they did. Then they lost it. You know why? Because they didn't hit runners scoring position. The pitching wasn't very good, and the Nationals won that series. Can't happen here. The Mets have to follow this Phillies series up with all the momentum they have now. They have to follow this series up by winning this series in Miami. A split is not what you want. You need to win this series 3 out of 4 or even a sweep. I won't say a sweep because it's hard to sweep, back-to-back series is one that's 3, one that's 4 in a row. But they need to win this series. This is a must series win for the Mets here. Every series is a must win, but you really need to win this one to show me that, or at least for me, they need to win this one. So I can look at the Mets and go, okay, maybe they have turned this thing around. Maybe they're ready to finally play like the team they're capable of being, you know, capable of being, team they're capable of playing as, the team that was 21 games over 500, the team that was, playing really good baseball and was the best record in baseball when the season, when it was almost 2.5, 3 months into the season, and not the way they played, up until maybe now. I don't know, but big series, but overall, big series for the Mets, big series win for the Mets. Getting a sweep of the Phillies is big. Now you're back in the division race. And hey, we'll see what happens. Again, we'll see what happens. That series in Philadelphia has now gotten a lot bigger now. 4 games in Philadelphia. That series is now a lot bigger than it was, say, 3 or 4 or 5 days ago. You know, not even a week ago, 3, 4, 5 days ago, 3 days ago, right? You know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever, 3 weeks ago, a month ago. It is that series is now much bigger than it was before Monday night. So we'll see what happens in that series. But before we get to that series, the Mets got to win. The Mets got to continue playing good baseball. And it starts this weekend before that Philly series, before the Citizens Bank Park, 4 games. So, but before we get to that Marlins series, that key Marlins series, for 4 games starting tonight, Clay Holmes pitches for the Mets tonight. And hopefully the Mets can get a couple, at least another 5 or 6 or so innings out of him tonight. He has pitched relatively well in 4 of his last 5 outings, so hopefully he continues that tonight for the Mets. But some other Met news over the weekend. Obviously, the big one. Well, there's 2 big ones. Jonah Tong. We'll start with the first one. There's some good big news and not bad, but certainly kind of a bummer. But the good news is Jonah Tong has been called up. Jonah Tong, who this was quick, 2 starts in AAA, and that was it. And the Mets have now called him up because they think he's ready. They think he's really good. They think he's ready to pitch now in Major League Baseball. So we'll see. And I also think a lot of it is Nolan McLean. I think a lot of it is the Mets see McLean and they go, oh, maybe Jonathan can do that, can do it too. So again, yeah, maybe, but again, it's a lot to ask to look at John and go, oh, John, can you do what Nolan McLean's doing? It's a lot to ask, especially in the middle of a playoff push, but they're calling him up. Starting tomorrow night against the Marlins. Should be an interesting night and and hopefully a fun night for Met fans showing up at Citi Field and for Met fans overall. Because if Jonathan goes out there tomorrow night and pitches really well, all of a sudden the excitement level gets really up. The Mets have the potential next season to have a rotation of Jonathan, uh, 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 Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, and don't forget about Christian Scott. Don't forget about him. He'll be coming back next year. So all of a sudden, the Mets starting rotation in the future, is starting to kind of take shape a bit. So for all the people worrying about why the Mets are signing bargain bin free agent starters and not paying big money, this is why. This is why. It's because they got young guys coming up. They got some young guys. So this is why they didn't go out and pay, for some of the other big free agent pitchers that have been out there the last couple of weeks. They did try, they did. They tried to get Sasaki last year, this past offseason. They tried last year to get Yamamoto. But, part of the reason why they didn't pay big money free agents like say a Corbin Burns or so is this is why. Because of Tom, because of McLean, because of Sproat, and again, you still have Christian Scott. So, but Jonathan will make his debut on Friday night. We'll see how he does. Other Mets news also, some injury stuff. So Jesse Winker and Jose Siri are making rehab games. So they're on their way back. Francisco Alvarez, if you guys remember it against the Seattle Mariners, he hurt his right thumb sliding into second base, and he was placed on the injured list. And he was progressing pretty well. He hit the cage about a few days ago, and at City Field, and then since that went well, his first rehab start was yesterday uh, at Syracuse. Well, unfortunately, in that game, he got hit in the pinky, uh, or his left pinky, I think it was, and he had to be taken out of the game. And unfortunately, it's a fracture, but it is a small fracture. According to Carlos Mendoza, it is a small. So Francisco Alvarez told Anthony DeCuomo that Mets.com's Anthony DeCuomo that he broke his pinky on a pitch that hit his hand, and he was hopeful to play. And Carlos Mendoza said earlier today before the game, he said that Francisco Alvarez is hopeful he can play again this season, and that he'll be out at least for 2 to 3 days. They said so for 2 to 3 days, not weeks, days. That Alvarez will be sidelined. So, and he'll be seeing a doctor later this afternoon. So we'll find out more as the next few days come along. We'll find out, so we'll find out more in the next few days. But hopefully, again, hopefully it's small fracture. Hopefully we'll see Alvarez still again pretty soon. Hopefully it's just these next 2 to 3 days. That's why I say it doesn't sound like at least from what we see, it doesn't sound like a terrible broken finger out for the rest of the season kind of thing. It just sounds like it has delayed Alvarez's rehab and return at least for a couple days, which you feel for Alvarez. Again, I said in the last, you just so feel for him. You feel for him. This is a guy who's worked incredibly hard, and he's a good hitter when healthy. And he's a good hitter when he's right. Dude can't catch a break right now. So you just hope that he can get a break one day, a positive thing for him. He can come back and play because he's a very good hitter, and the Mets need him in that lineup. So that's kind of the news around the Mets with Jonah Tong, Winker and Siri, and Francisco Alvarez. Frankie Montas, one more thing. Frankie Montas is going to get Tommy John, I believe. He has a torn UCL. He needs UCL surgery, and he's out for next season as well. So Montaz's injury. So Montaz is now pretty sure that's the whole 2 years of his Mets contract. So that stinks for him. To not play he didn't play most of this season, and now he's out for all of next season. So, but that's some news out of the Mets today as the Mets begin to play a 4-game series with the Miami Marlins. Again, this is such a big series for them. They need this series. They got to win. If you want to win, if you want to show that you're ready to make a run and that you're ready to show that Philly series is just the beginning of, something more, and you're ready to turn this thing around officially, you know, you know, well, this is the series to prove it here. You got to win this one against Miami. And this will be a tough series, a very, very tough series for the New York Mets. Clay Holmes pitches in this game for the Mets. He'll pitch game one of the series on tonight, excuse me. Friday, there will be the debut of Jonah Tong. Friday will be the debut of Jonah Tong. He will match up against Orlando Perez. Saturday, David Pearson takes them out against Edmundo Cabrera. And then Sunday, Sandy Alcantara takes them out for the Miami Marlins on Sunday. And I believe the Mets will do Kodai Senga. It says TBD for the Marlins, but SNY had the graphic that said Sandy Alcantara. So I assume it will be Sandy Alcantara against Kodai Senga. But tonight, Clay Holmes takes them out for the Mets against Mazier. So this will be interesting. So again, Mets got to win this series. You got to win at least 3. Got to win at least 3 in this series. You got to win at least 3 out of 4 and show that you're ready to make a run, that you're ready to make a push for the playoffs, and that you're ready to turn the season around and start playing like the team that you can be. Because if you go out there and you have a letdown series and you lose 3 out of 4, get swept, or even split, then we're going to come back Monday and go, all right. There's still some work to be done here with this team. Maybe this team just is not going to turn it on, and just maybe they'll make a wild card, but they don't look like they might go deep into the playoffs. Like, so if you come out and have that kind of series, we're going to come back Monday and we're going to go, all right, you know. So, maybe they're not going to make a deep push to the playoffs. Maybe things really haven't turned around. So this is a key series for the Mets. This is a big series. They got to win this series, win at least 3 out of 4 or whatever. They've got or sweep or whatever. But they've got to win this series and prove and show that that Philly series was not a fluke, that beating the Braves 2 out of 3 was not a fluke, beating the Mariners 2 out of 3 was not a fluke, that this recent stretch with their offense, they continue to have that stretch, that they can start to get a little bit better, more starting pitching. So they need to prove that in this series. If they can, then they can continue it and make a run. So we'll see. This is a big series for them because Miami is going to come in. They're going to play hard. So this is a big series. We'll see what happens over the weekend. So anyway, that'll be it for this episode of MazzaOnMets. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for listening. I will be back tomorrow for Mazza Ravens. There's a lot to talk about around the NFL. Saturday will be Mazza Jets. Again, lots to talk about the Ravens and the Jets. Monday, we'll do a full preview show. It's the beginning of the new season. NFL is now here. The opening game is on Thursday. Micah Parsons is now a Green Bay Packer. But Monday, I will do both Ravens, preview both the Ravens, preview both the Jets in the same show, talk about their records, talk about what I think how they'll do this season, and where I think they'll be. And I'll give you my Super Bowl pick for Monday. Will the Ravens be in there? Well, you'll have to tune in to find out. Anyway, that'll be it for MazzaOnMets. Thank you very much for tuning in. Give this video a like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day, and let's go Mets.